Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to go over some more complex, well, not really complex, they're just worded differently, sine, cosine, and tangent, radian problems. So let's start. If sine theta equals 1/4, then find cosine theta when 3 pi over 2 is less than theta, and theta is less than 2 pi, just 2 pi. So first, let's just find what quadrant this is in. 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. Well, if we think about our unit circle, this point down here is 3 pi over 2. This is pi over 2, and this is 2 pi. Well, if we're saying 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi, it is right here. And this quadrant is quadrant 4, where cosine is positive and sine is negative. So we got that out of the way. Cosine is positive and sine is negative. Now, sine equals 1/4. Find cosine. What we could do is we could just use the Pythagorean theorem, or we could use the Pythagorean identity. I'll use the Pythagorean identity here. So that means sine squared, it's really cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1. So I'll just write it like it is. Cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is really 1/4 squared equals 1. So cosine squared theta plus 1/16 equals 1. Then cosine squared theta equals 1 minus 1 over 16 is 15 over 16. You square root both sides. A little messy. And then we're going to get cosine theta equals root 15 over the square root of 16 is 4. So it's a root 15 over 4. But now we look at the quadrant. Is cosine positive? Well, cosine is positive in quadrant 4, so our answer is just root 15 over 4. But if this was asking for sine, it would be negative. Okay. Now, if tangent theta equals -1, find sine theta when pi over 2 is less than theta is less than pi. So let's just find the quadrant again. Here's pi over 2, here's 2 pi, here's 3 pi over 2, and here's pi. So pi over 2 is less than theta is less than pi. Well, pi over 2 to pi. This is quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, the sine, well, let's do cosine. The cosine's negative and sine is positive. So cosine negative, sine positive. And we got this because this would be, we know it's correct, first of all, because we've made the graph. But second of all, because these cannot be the same sign. It has to be a negative and a positive, because it'll be cosine divided by sine, and negative divided by a positive is a negative. That's just another thing. Now, we have to think of our special triangles, because you're not going to just be asked this question if it's not in a special triangle. We're going to say that's a 45-45 does not look like a 45-45. And we're going to say this is a 30-60-90. So this is 1, this is root 3, this is 2, this is 1, this is 1, this is root 2. Now, we have to think, is there any one of these angles that the tangent of it will give us 1? Don't care about the negative right now. We already know it's going to be negative. Just look for the 1. We're looking at reference angles. So let's start with 30 degrees. Well, tangent of 30 degrees is 1 over root 3. Root 3 over 3. That is not 1. Tangent of 60 is root 3 over 1. That's root 3. That's not 1. Tangent of 45, doesn't matter which one you take, is 1 over 1. 1 over 1 is equal to 1. So we are going to take the 45 degrees, and we're just going to be like, okay, well then sine. We know that tangent theta is -1, so we know that it is a 45 degrees. Now we have to find the sine of 45 degrees. So what's the sine of 45 degrees? Well, it's 1 over root 2, but then rationalize to root 2 over root 2 equals root 2 over 2. But now look at the quadrant we're in. We're finding sine. Cosine's negative, sine is positive. So since sine is positive, it is root 2 over 2. Again, you found tangent theta is -1. You had to find the special triangle it's in. Find the angle that makes it correct, which in this case, it's either 45-degree angle. And then find the sine of that angle. And we did that. And then remember to apply it to the quadrant you are in. Now we're just going straight up to a random question. Find cosine of -70 pi over 3. So, let's think about this. First, what's our reference angle? Take the pi, take the denominator. So our reference angle is pi over 3. Pi over 3 is our reference angle. Now, let's find how many times 70 goes into 3. We're going to find out how many pi's we can take out of this. That'll be helpful for us graphing. So -70 over 3. I know I can take 23's out of that because that is 60. 21 is 63. 22 is 66. And 23 is 69. So we can take 23. This is a pi. This will be a -23, which will be, we're taking -69 pi's out of this -70 pi over 3. And then, what are we left over with? Well, we're left with pi over 3. So it'll be -23 pi over 3. This is a doozy to graph. But remember, when it's negative, you are going clockwise. Usually you go counterclockwise. But we are going to go clockwise because it is negative. So let's just think first how many times this is going to go around. I know this would be -2 pi. So if we start here, -2 pi, it'll get back. Then like -4 pi, -6 pi, and so on. Right? Then eventually we'll get to -22 pi, and then -24 pi. Well, I see -22 pi. That can go into -23 pi. We're good. -24 pi? No, we can't go that far. We don't have that much. So we know it's not that. So -22 pi out of like -23 pi. So we're just going to start at -pi over 3. Because we know if we go -22 pi, we are going to get back to the starting place. So might as well start at the starting place and just get rid of those -22 pi. Now we have to graph -pi over 3. So -pi is here. Then go an extra pi over 3. Be like there. And that would be -23 pi over 3. Now, what angle does pi over 3 create? Well, what triangle are we making? Well, since it's pi over 3, we have to go with a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Get it? Because this 3 has to be with a 6. And if this was a pi over 6, it has to be with a 3. Now, this is 1 root 3, 2. What are we doing? We are finding cosine of this pi over 3, which is really this 60. This 60 is pi over 3. So we are finding the cosine. So root 3 over 1. Well, root 3 over 1 is really root 3. But now look at the quadrant we landed in. Remember to go back to the quadrant. This quadrant is quadrant 2, which means cosine's negative, sine is positive. And since we were finding cosine, this root 3 will be negative root 3. It's a doozy, but you got to be able to do these where you're going negative. You have to find huge amounts of pi. Remember, we found the most amount of times we can just go around the circle because if you were really graphing this, you would look like this, and you would do this 11 times, and then you would land and show, oh, I did that. But I just tell you, find how many 2 pi's you can take out of it, and that'll just tell you like what you have to start at. So if this was negative 3 pi, well, I know I can take a negative 2 pi out of that, so I really only have to graph negative pi. But remember to show your circle showing that you went around. One last question. Now, we are given this triangle, and we know the base is 0.68. Now, we have to find what the possible angle measures are of theta. We know theta is this base angle here. If this is in our unit circle, and this is 0.68, we know that the hypotenuse will be 1, because the radius of the unit circle is 1. It is a unit. Now, how do we find theta? First of all, yes, how do we find theta? Well, if we want to find theta, we have to do the inverse of cosine negative 1, theta equals 0.68 over 1, which is really equal to 0.68. So cosine negative 1 of theta is equal to 0.68. So theta equals cosine negative 1. Sorry. Cosine of theta equals 0.68 over 1. So then cosine negative 1 of 0.68 equals theta. So theta is cosine negative 1 of 0.68. Now, is that the only angle? No. We know that there should be 4 angles for this. If this is 60 degrees, we know it's 60, 120, 180. Oh, there was a lot more for that. Yeah, but you have to find your reference angles. Again. So what do we do? In the first quadrant, this is our angle. Second quadrant, we have to do, this is 180. So we have to do 180 minus this angle, and we'll get an angle in this quadrant. Then we have to do 180 plus this angle, and we're getting an angle in this quadrant. Then we have to do 360 minus this angle, and we'll get an angle in this quadrant. The reason we know that it's going to land in that quadrant is because it's less than 90 degrees. So we know 180 minus something that's less than 90 degrees is going to be between 179 and 91. So we know it has to land in there. And then this normal angle is just a random one in here. And this is the reference angle. So what did we say? Well, second quadrant is 180 minus the angle. So 180 minus cosine negative 1 of 0.68. Then there's 180 plus cosine negative 1 of 0.68. And then there's also 360 minus cosine negative 1 of 0.68. So we don't just have this one angle that we have in this triangle here, because this triangle could be made multiple times throughout the circle. It could be made 4 times throughout the circle. So we have to account for that. We have to do 180 minus angle, 180 plus angle, then 360 minus angle. And we also have this normal angle of 0.6, cosine negative 1 of 0.68. So we have 4 answers. Remember that. You have your normal angle, then 180 minus that angle, 180 plus that angle, and 360 minus that angle. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. Thank you for coming back to me, and have a nice day.